Hello everyone. Today I'll be showing you how to create extensions, a type of mod for the game Tanks the Crusades. You'll need a few things to get started though. You'll need IntelliJ, which is a Java IDE, and you'll also need a Java JDK in order to get started. Now once you have those, here's what you need to do to create a mod. So the first step is you'll want to have a jar file for the game Tanks. So you can get that in several different ways. If you use Steam to play Tanks, you can just open up Steam and you go to your library to find your games. And as you can see here, Tanks the Crusades. You'll want to find the game directory where Steam puts the game file. So you just click Manage and you can click Browse Local Files. And here you'll see a bunch of things. If you're on Windows, you'll see the tanks.jar here. And that's what you need. If you're on Mac, it'll be a little bit more tricky. You'll have a .app file, which you have to go inside of. And there's a few folders you can go inside of, but you'll find a tanks.jar inside of there too. So this is what you need to start developing. And if you don't have the game on Steam, you can find it through other ways. There's a link that I'll leave for you to find it, but it's in the Tanks Archive OneDrive folder. You're probably launching the game from the jar file anyway. If you're on mobile, unfortunately, you can't create mods. This is a limitation of the mobile platforms, not of Tanks. So sorry about that. So yeah, what you'll want to do is you'll want to fire up IntelliJ, and you will want to create a new project. Give me a second. This is the other Tanks project, the actual code. And when we create a new project, we'll want to give it a name. I'll call this the Tanks tutorial mod. Let me capitalize these. And these settings are all fine. For JDK, you can select anything you want as long as it's above version 8, so 1.8. But anything higher is probably fine too. And just do create, and you'll have an empty project here, which is very cool because now we get to actually work with this. The first thing you'll want to do is find that tanks jar that I was saying about earlier, and you'll want to copy and paste it into the project here, which is the top level folder. Control-C, Control-V. Now the tanks jar will be inside of the project. So, but we need to do one more thing so we can actually detect it. We have to right-click and click Add as Library down here. And it seems like it'll take a little bit, but just click OK. And we're all set now. So now what we want to do is we have to do a few more things. We want to create a class file. So let me do that a bit slowly so you can see. So you go to right-click on SRC and then select New and then select Java class. And you can give it whatever name you want. This is going to be the base class. I'm going to call it My Extension. And you'll have a wonderful class My Extension here once you're done. And now what you'll want to do is you'll want to extend the extension class from the tanks jar. So how you do that is you just type in extends, and then you just type in extension. And you'll see here what will pop up is something that says extension from tanks.extension. If this doesn't pop up, it means you didn't import the jar file properly. So you might need to double check that. So you do that, and now you'll have a red underline underneath. This is okay. Just hover over it, and it'll tell you some stuff you can do. So you just want to create constructor matching super. And that is all it really wanted me to do. So that should be fine for now. You'll want to give it your own name here instead of having it pass in a string name. This is your extension name. So I'm going to call this my tutorial extension. So now this is our entry point, this class file, to the tanks game. So you can always peek inside of the game code, you can do it in multiple ways. You can unfold this tanks.jar and check out the different things. That most of the interesting stuff should be in tanks, and you can read all sorts of code here. For example, if I want to read the code for tank AI controlled, you can just click it here, and you'll see a bunch of information about different stuff in this class. This is very useful, by the way. And if you want the full commented version, which is, it has the sources, you can always pull up the game's code on GitHub. The GitHub link will be github.com. Let me pull this up here. github.com/aehmttw/tanks. And all of the code is here. You can browse all the files here, and they have comments. It's very nice. Yeah. So now that we have my extension, we'll want to see what is inside of the extension class, because we have to get started with some stuff. So if you do, actually, this is a very useful keybind you should probably know. If you hover on something and you don't know what it is, or just click on it, and then do Control B. Control B will take you over to that class itself, and you'll be able to see what's inside of it. So you can see extension has a name. It has a jar file, which we probably don't need to worry about right now. And it has some things: register sound, register music async. These are for resources. Now these are the cool things. We have pre-update, pre-draw, update, and draw. And these get called whenever the game draws or updates. So these two events happen every frame. An update, which handles changing positions of tanks, game logic and such. And then a draw. The draw just handles drawing the game scene. It doesn't really change the game state. And this is a util function, not very important right now. What you'll want to do is, the two important methods that we need to care about are setup and load resources, specifically setup. So in setup, what we can do is we can take this setup, copy it, and then we can just paste it here. And because we're extending the extension class, it means anything that we put in our setup will override what is in the extension setup. This is something called inheritance in Java, which means we can do our own code here. If you want to make this clear, you can always say @override here. And @override is something just for your editor to know you're overriding a method, and it will give an error if if it's called setup lol, because there's no method called setup lol in extension. There's only setup. So it's just a sanity check to make sure you're doing the right thing here and not something else. So inside of setup, we can do things like register tanks, register bullets, etc., which is very cool. So let's say we want to make a new tank, right? Well, what you want to do is you want to find the tank file for the base tanks. This would be inside of tank AI controlled. So in this tanks jar directory, it would be in tank/tank/tank AI controlled. Now, this is a bit messy because it was decompiled, so it lost all of the comments. So I'm going to pull up the actual source of the game, which you can find on GitHub as well. It has more useful information. Sorry for the messiness here. You can also double-click Shift to get a big window here that lets you just jump to wherever you want and type in tank AI control. And cool, I'll close these to the side here because we want more space. So you can see stuff here, like whether the tank is invisible, enable movement, all of this cool stuff, right? So the way in this game, all the enemy tanks, how they work, is that they all extend tank AI controlled. And each of them has different parameters. The options are different for all of them. For example, if I go to tank black, these fields are different. It says cooldown base is 75, cooldown random. And since each tank is unique, oh, I didn't want to do that. You can see that what happens here in the code is different for each tank, which is why each tank is unique. Yeah. This is the tank that blows wind, you can see that its bullet class is bullet air dot class. Its cooldown base, which is like the time between bullets, is 0 because it keeps shooting a stream of air. And the bullet speed is 6.25, which is the faster speed usually that like rockets are at, and air and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. So now suppose we want to make our own tank, right? What you can do is you can obviously just copy one of the other tank files. You know, let's say I really just like the orange-red tank, the one that shoots the explosive bullets. You can just click Control-C, and then we go into our own tanks tutorial mod. And I'll close the tanks jar, and we can just paste it here, right? So now we have a new tank orange-red, but I'm going to change it. So instead of being called tank orange-red, I'm going to rename it to be called Tank Awesomeness. And another very cool IntelliJ trick, if you want to rename something and change all of the references to that name to a new name, you just do Shift F6. That is the Shift key and the F6 key on the very top row. You might need to use the FN key if you're on a laptop or if you have a weird keyboard. And then just press Enter, and it'll rename everything. It's very cool. This is why IDEs are so cool. So you can see here, there are some things that are being set here. For example, the max speed 0.75. You know, I don't like slow tanks, so I'm going to set the max speed to 2. Now, 2 is a pretty fast speed for a tank. Bullets move at, I think, 3.125 is your default bullet. So a speed of 2 is pretty fast. I think this should be on par with like the black tank. And now there's cooldown random and cooldown base, which are the amount of time that has to pass between bullets. You know, if you're ever curious what it does, just do Control B. Now here we can see that cooldown base is the minimum time that has to pass between firing bullets. So now we know that, so we can, you know, change it. I want the cooldown to be 30, and cooldown random and cooldown base to also be 30. Random is basically a random factor. So if the cooldown base is 30 and the cooldown random is 30, then the cooldown between two shots will be somewhere between either 30 or 30 plus 30. So 30 to 60. And these are in hundredths of a second. So this is 0.3 to 0.6 seconds, which is pretty fast of a shooting. Now you can change the speed at which the turret turns when it's aiming. There's a bunch of properties here you can just change because there's just a bunch of cool stuff out there. Yeah, I think this is good for now. We just want an explosive tank which shoots a lot of bullets. I think, oh, the other thing, max life bullets. It can only have 2 bullets on the screen at once. Let's make it 20 because we need more craziness. So now that we have our own tank, how do we really add it to the game? Well, this is what I was saying about the setup in the registry. We need to add it to the tank registry. And this is pretty simple to do, actually. What you have to do is do game.register tank. And then you give it a few parameters. Here, you can go Control B to see what you need to do. And here's the options. A class that extends tank, which will be our tank awesomeness. A name and a weight. The weight is basically how often it'll appear in things like arcade mode or in random levels. You know, a bigger weight means it'll be more common. So the class here is just tank awesomeness dot class. Then the next one is the name. I'll call it awesomeness. And let's give it a weight of 1, which is pretty common. That's about equal to what brown and gray tanks, which are the most common, have. So this is very cool. Now, the next question is, how do we run this? So how we need to do that is we need to have a main method. A main method in Java and in programming in many languages is where the program just starts, you know, where everything starts. So in Java, it's actually a pretty long thing. What you have to write in is public static void main, and then parentheses, and in those parentheses, string brackets args. That's for the argument array. When you call it with arguments, it'll pass them in there. So now what you want to do is you just want to do tanks, and this should be the tanks here that's in main, dot launch with extension. And you'll just pass in the same args here. And now you just want to give it an array with all the extensions you're launching it with, as you can see here. So just to do that, you do new extension, brackets, and then curly brackets, and then just do new my extension. And you need to give it one more argument, and that's for the order, but you can just pass in null and it'll pick for you. And now that we have a main function here, we can right-click the class and select run myExtension.main. And this should run tanks. I'll turn the volume down so you can hear a bit better. But now, as you can see, we have tanks running, and if you go to About, it'll say one extension loaded here, which is the one that we added. So just go to My Levels and click New Level, and you'll see this is our tank. We didn't change the name or anything, so it looks exactly like the regular exploding bullet tank. So we'll just put one here, and let's fight it. And you can see it's very fast. Not only that, but it shoots a lot of bullets. It's scary. Let's try to beat it now. It shouldn't be that hard, should it? Those explosive bullets are really annoying. Well, we got it. So that's the simple gist of creating a new tank. But, you know, someone's gonna ask me, can you do this with the custom tank editor? And yes, you could. You could totally do this with the custom tank editor. And this is one of the reasons I added the custom tank editor. So you could do this with the custom tank editor without actually having to change anything in the actual game, like without modding stuff. But you can still do more if you do modding than you can do in the custom tank editor. So you might remember from earlier, we did something called overriding, right? Right here, this setup. Turns out you can do this with tanks as well. So if you take a look at the tank AI control by clicking it and doing Control B, or by going to the game source code and seeing the source via GitHub or whatever you have, you can see at the very beginning of this tank AI controlled file, there's a bunch of fields. These are basically the properties of the tank. But if you keep scrolling down, you get to methods, which are basically the functionality. There's a bunch of stuff that's going on in here. But here we have the main update. As you saw, I talked about update earlier on. This happens every frame to change the state of the tank. For example, for moving, updating its AI, etc., etc. So as you can see here, it does a bunch of stuff every frame. But we don't actually care about all of this. For example, we don't care about the tank committing suicide that much. We don't care about it checking charge or being a mimic tank. That's for very specific tanks. Now, what if I wanted the tank to get fatter every time it shot a bullet? Well, first you have to find where the tank shoots bullets. So there's something called launch bullet once it has decided for sure it's going to shoot. We'll go there. You can always do Control F to find it. Launch fire bullet? Yeah, fire bullet. Launch bullet was what it was called before in the past, I think. So inside the fire bullet, you can see it's doing a bunch of stuff here. And we don't want to really change it, we just want to add to it. So how do we do that? So first, we'll just copy the method header, which is here. Go to our tank, which is tank awesomeness, and let's make the color a bit more exciting. So the color here is RGB. I'm going to make it very bright yellow, so we can just tell it apart better. So now you just want to paste the method header here and make sure the brackets are there to begin and end the method. And we want to just add override to make sure we did everything right. And now what we effectively did is we replaced the fire bullet method of the tank AI control with ours, which does nothing. So it just won't be able to fire anything. However, we don't want it to do that. We want it to do what we tell it to do, plus what it normally does. So if you want it to do what it normally would have done, you just type in super, which is, it refers to tank AI controlled, and then do dot fire bullet, and then just pass in what you were passed. B, speed, and offset. And now, if you want to just make the tank get fatter, it's very simple. One-liner. This dot size plus equals and how much you want it to be. The default tank size is 50, so let's just do 5. So it'll get 10% larger from its base size every time it shoots. Now let's try it out. So we'll fire up this level, and you can see our tank is yellow now. And now the tank will start shooting. And you can see the tank got a little bit fatter. And it keeps getting fatter and fatter every time it shoots. My, that is one big tank. And there's really no limit to how big it'll get. It'll just keep getting bigger and bigger. I don't know why it's shooting that way, though. Yeah, it still has 1 health despite everything. But that's the general gist of things. You can override any method inside of tank AI control that you see and make it do whatever you want it to do. You know, very much power you have to do stuff. So that's just how to create a new custom tank. You can obviously create other custom things like obstacles and bullets, items, etc. And you know, if you want to make one of those, you can just look into the bullet class, the item class, etc., obstacle, and figure it out. It's not that much different from creating a new custom tank. If there's a lot of demand, I can create another video for those as well. But let's just talk about how we can share these extensions with other people and how you can install extensions that someone else has given you. So we'll need to create a special file inside of our folder first. So you can do that by right-clicking and selecting, actually you want to put it in the SRC folder. New file. And it should be called extension.txt. And inside of this extension.txt, you're going to want to add just one thing. The name of this class with packages in front of it if it's in a package. Right now it's not in a package, so you just put tank, actually my extension, not tank awesomeness. So my extension. And that is it, all you need to do. And this extension.txt file will basically just let the game load the extension automatically after detecting it, because it knows where to start out, which is very cool, I think. Yeah, if it was in a package called my extension, it would be my extension.myextension or something like that. Awesomeness.myextension if the package was awesomeness. So now we have to export this as a jar file. So you want to have a build artifact for this. So you go to File, Project Structure, and go to Artifacts. Click the plus thing here and select jar and choose empty. Now inside of the jar, you'll want to add the tanks tutorial mod compile output. You can double click it to add it. And that is it. You don't want to add the tanks project library because that's the tank game itself. It'll ask you to create a manifest. Just make a new one and that's it. That's all you need to do. You don't need to select the main class or class path, I think. Now just give it a name. I'm going to call it my tutorial extension. And just click OK. And now to make it actually build, you go to build, build artifact, and then just select this thing and select build. And it will build it, and it'll appear in out/artifacts and down here. So you can right click this and open in Explorer to find the actual file on your file system. It'll pop up right here. Cool. So now suppose you want to actually play tanks with this thing. So you want to go to your tanks directory, which is in your folder, and it is .tanks here. It might be hidden, so you might have to either enable hidden files or use the... If you're on Mac, it'll be hidden. You have to use Shift-Command-G to get here. Squiggly line /.tanks. Put it in there. And then you'll find this folder that has extensions, and it'll be empty for you. Just plop it in there. And now all you have to do is change a few options. So inside of options.txt, there's two things that are of note. Enable extensions and auto load extensions. So by default, enable extensions will be false. You need to set this to true and then save the options file. It was already true for me. And auto load extensions should also be true if it isn't already. This basically lets you auto load it. If you don't have that true, you will have to use extensions.txt to manually add all of the extensions, which is more annoying. So now you should be able to fire up the game from Steam. And if you go to About, you'll see it says 1 extension loaded. So now I can go to my levels and create a new level, and my tank is here. And if someone else gives you an extension, this is the same thing you have to do. Just put it in that folder and make sure that the option is set to true. And now you can share this jar file with your friends, and everyone can use it. Very cool, I think. Well, I think that's all for this video. I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.